Welcome to episode 8.5 of LA Not So Confidential. I'm Dr. Shiloh, and I'm here with
Dr. Scott. Welcome back, folks. It's good to be hearing from you again because we're getting a lot more feedback from our followers, which is really exciting.
Actually, today's a very exciting day.
Yeah,
we're kind of on a high right now.
Yeah, I'm a little jittery.
So, as everyone knows, today is the day that the Ron Burgundy podcast debuted.
Yeah.
And last night, we got the news that his first episode would be the true crime episode featuring Dr. Scott.
Yeah, so I'm pretty much vibrant. I mean, this is a peak experience, which is kind of sad, to think that, okay, it's like this is the peak experience, and I can be on my death, I can be an old man. At least I was on Ron Burgundy. I don't know why as an old man I would suddenly have a weird Yankee accent.
I know. So, give us a little bit of what it was like, the experience was like back in November now.
Right. It does seem like a long time ago, and you were part of that. We have a wonderful colleague over in Beverly Hills, Dr. Paula Bruce, who's a really, really well-known and respected forensic psychologist and has an entire practice that's all around forensic issues. And she happened to be on vacation, and the Will Ferrell, Ron Burgundy podcast that was, ramping up production, had called her and said, we want somebody to come in and be a forensic psych. And Paula's like, I can't do it, but let me check and see if I can get you a referral. And she texted me. I was like, she didn't even finish the text. I was like, yes, I'll do it. Yes, please. Please, I'll do it. Except that I said, I wanted to find out what it was. I wanted to make sure, first thing I said was, look, if you're expecting me to keep my shit together in front of Will Ferrell doing Ron Burgundy, and that's not going to happen.
Right.
And they were really cool and said, no, that's not really it. It's
just be natural.
Just be natural. And, if you laugh, you laugh. But it's more about him being absurd. And then they were really cool because they knew that you were my partner. And at one point it was going to be the two of us. And then they really didn't
have it written that way to some extent.
But we both got to go to the recording studios.
It was so fun.
And boy, it's a professional setup.
Yes, it is.
It's a Hollywood studio.
What are we doing here? Ooh, there's snacks for us?
I was like Bogart and those snacks. Hey, can I take these with me?
Oh my gosh. No, it was so fun to just sit in the engineering room and watch it and listen to it. And yeah, we just knew it was going to be awesome.
Yeah.
And it's so hilarious.
Yeah.
You haven't even listened to it yet.
I haven't.
Today.
I wanted to make sure that, everybody that I trusted, or at least a few people that okay, they're approving.
Terrible.
It's not going to be terrible, or I'm not going to come off looking silly.
Right. No, I think even more than just it being exciting because we now have a podcast and it's a podcast is that even though it's hilarious, you're able to show your expertise. And
do I? Because I don't remember. I'll listen to it tonight. Okay.
Yes, you do. And you could be this subject matter expert that goes on and talks in any arena about forensic psychology, and which is a really cool tie-in because that's what this mini episode is going to be all about today.
Right.
So that's
the only difference is that you don't have Will Ferrell and his amazing producer Carolina sitting across the table from you, and they're making themselves laugh and literally biting their hands and turning away from the microphone because they're laughing so hard. That.
Yeah.
They're pros.
Yeah.
And by the way, the entire staff was amazing. Anna, Carolina, they were and treated us so well. In fact, I brought you your gift today. They gave us champagne.
I know.
What the hell? I'll do any free booze.
And fancy candles.
I'm in. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
And soap. Are they trying to tell us something? Maybe we had a hygiene issue? I don't know.
I think because it's specifically rum soap.
Oh.
It's not Scotch soap, but it's an alcohol-based soap.
I'm going to stick with that. So yeah, we're doing supposedly a mini episode.
We'll see how it goes.
We'll see if we can keep it mini.
But since we've been doing this podcast for over a year now, we have had so many inquiries into how we got into the field. Hey, I'm a student. What should I look for? What's the field really about? And I think those are all wonderful questions, and I'm glad people are thinking that far ahead. But I thought maybe we would kind of share our stories about how we got into the field,
right?
Because I don't think either of us had this A to Z path planned out.
No. And you made a good point, too, because you went back and listened to our first episode, like to see how much of that we covered, and you had the really great observation that we also sounded like we had sticks up our butts.
Yeah,
so
it took like a good 10 minutes for us to I'm like, who are these people that we're listening to? This is so goddamn dry. Jesus. Come on now. But then you crack some joke and we like loosen up and it was much better. But yeah, we explored it a little bit there, but we didn't really. How did you decide that you wanted to get a degree in this? And then how did you find your program?
So mine was, I didn't know that this kind of thing really existed. I mean, other than, we made the joke about B.D. Wong being a law enforcement psychologist on the crime shows.
Right.
And then, Clarice Starling in Silence of the Lambs being a profiler, but she's not a psychologist. She's a law enforcement specialist in this area. But I started out at the master's level. I had been working in entertainment, and I had a great couple of decades in entertainment. I was really lucky to do some phenomenal things, but everything that I did, out here in entertainment, there are wonderful jobs, and a lot of them are what we call 1099s. They're contract jobs. You get no benefits. Mm-hmm. And I was at a point where I had not gone the executive route at a studio or a production company, and it was like, I need to make a decision. So I had been pulled toward being a therapist, and I knew some friends that were, marriage and family therapists and social workers in private practice. And I was like, I think this will be interesting. So, and I was really pushed by my own therapist. I was really doing my own work then, and which I felt weird. Like we had conversations like, Ralph, why are you pushing me? That's like, how I can't stand listening to myself talk. How am I going to listen to other people? And he pointed out he made some really insightful comments about what he knew of me as a person. And he said, look, just do this. Just go take an intro class. Take the intro class to the MFT program and see what you think. So 10 minutes in to an introductory course, and I was like, sign me the hell up. I was hooked. Yeah. Because you feel like, especially as an adult going back to school, I pushed my way with 2 degrees through my undergrad and really was hard charging then. But as an adult, many years later, to have all these different areas of your brain, it just felt like my synapses were crackling again. Mm-hmm. And so then the problem is with any grad program in a soft science, in a way, is that you really don't know what questions to ask until you're 3/4 of the way through the program. Yeah. So I get through this counseling program with really great education and training on providing individual, couple, family, child evaluation, child treatment, family treatment, individual treatment. And, I'm starting to find out like, that doesn't really appeal to me. This part does, that part doesn't. And then I realized I don't want to do private practice that much. I like it, but I don't want to be doing it 40 hours a week. And I was going to Antioch University, Culver City, and they announced that a doctoral program was opening in Santa Barbara. And the doctoral program had an emphasis it was a clinical psychology program with an emphasis in family forensics. Had not a clue what family forensics was. Even when they explained it to me, I was like, what? Not really? Okay. Yeah. But I decided to do it, and then started that level of education, which was even, farther and deeper. Started learning about forensics and had these fantastic professors that are sort of the go-to psychologists in Santa Barbara County for custody evaluations. Mm. So our forensics was really – that forensic program was the intersection of family forensics, like family evaluation, child evaluation for courts, for like divorce, for custody. And then we did some like expert witness classes and stuff. And that, my brain was like, oh, this is amazing. This is really cool. Although I wasn't sure I wanted to be right in the middle of squabbling parents doing child evaluations, even though it does to me too. But it's really lucrative. I mean, if you want to do it, you can, but you're going to have a lot of angry people coming at you from all directions. So thinking that I wanted to get away from that, I took a job at a prison when I graduated.
Talk about a lot of angry people.
Yeah. Well, and even before the prison, you and I met because we decided, you and I weren't going to be doing half-time internships. We wanted to get it over with and do full-time for pretty much free. We gave a year. I mean, how many hours is that?
$500 a month, Scott.
Oh,
what are you
that's
talking
right.
about?
We got a stipend of $500 a month.
It paid for my gas to downtown LA. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, maybe a couple of Subway sandwiches, maybe.
Or KFC in
KFC in South Central.
South Central LA.
Yeah, but that's another story.
That's a story for another time.
Yeah, that's where I met you, and then after we finished our year, you and I remained friends, and I started commuting to Central California to work in a prison and work in what's called a forensic men's outpatient. So it was basically people who years ago would have been institutionalized in like a state psychiatric hospital, but they've committed enough crimes to where they're incarcerated. So it was an incarcerated outpatient program, and really got even more into the forensics there. But the commuting killed me. So then I was able to get down here, work in the jail, work in another large agency.
Yeah.
So that's how I got here.
So mine was much different. I wanted to stay in law enforcement, and I had my eyes set on the FBI. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to go get a doctorate because they can't turn me down if I have a doctorate. It's such a competitive job.
Well, I'm also, like, you've told me the story before. My comment is always like that was your go-to. Oh, I'm just going to go get a doctorate. As if it's like going and picking up, you know, soap at the corner store. And you went to like an amazing, amazing program in Alliant.
I went to Alliant Los Angeles, and how I found them, this is kind of the funny part. Let me back up. So in undergrad, I took a legal psychology class. Do you remember when forensic psychology was called legal psychology?
No, I don't even remember that.
So I was double majoring in psychology and criminal justice because I knew both those things interested me. There was enough classes that overlapped that getting a double major degree wouldn't have been taking that much more time. But I took a legal psych class and loved it. Like you said, it was that sort of neuron firing, moment. And then I wanted to write a paper on criminal profiling. And I remember my professor saying, that doesn't really exist. It's not really a thing. Get your mind off of it.
Whoa, what year was this?
1999, 2000.
That's odd.
Kind of like it's far-fetched, which it is. It completely is. Like we said in our very first episode, there's not many jobs for criminal profiling. But it's a thing,
It
right?
is a thing. It's not that so for him to say or her to say that it's not a thing is a bit of a reach.
So what did I do? I wrote a badass paper on it, found all the research I could on it, and turned it in anyway. So that was kind of, my first introduction to it. So the first time I hear the words forensic psychology is when I'm reading a James Patterson, Alex Cross novel.
Wow.
So I loved those dumb books back then. So I'm reading that, and, Alex Cross's character is a detective, but then he goes and gets a degree in forensic psychology and opens his own private practice. And I'm like, I'm going to Google forensic psychology. I literally Google forensic psychology programs, and Alliant University comes up. It was from a book,
idea this was
fiction book series is what sparked me to say, let me see doctorates in that.
Wow.
And that was kind of paralleling the time that I was thinking about going to the FBI and had already been on the job as a police officer for a couple years. So I was, deciding what I was going to do. So I literally just Googled the term and found my school. I had a very informal phone interview with the director or the dean, and she was really interested in my law enforcement background and sort of what I wanted to study with that. So, fast forward, I take a leave of absence from the police department to do our internship, and I just loved that work so much that I was like, oh man, here I am about to do my background investigation with the FBI, but the company we were working for then offers me a job, and I had to pick between two wonderful things, which was great. But I realized that my dream of 10 years wasn't what I wanted to do anymore.
And it would have been hugely life-altering because you would be, you go where the FBI tells you to go.
Yes.
So,
yes. Yeah. So, no, I'm very, very happy with my decision. It's just kind of an interesting story to see how people get here. And I like to tell students or early career psychologists or people thinking about the field is that I love that you're putting so much thought into it. be flexible around, along the way, because you never know.
Yeah,
So-
your road can change, because I never knew that I would be ending up this way, and and I'm in a position where this path is unfolding in front of me. I'm not associated with the university in that, like, I'm not doing statistical research,
Right.
which is lovely and elegant, and there are other people out there that are way better than I would ever be, and I'm so grateful that they're out there, because that data is what we can extrapolate theories from, and
Right.
approaches, and treatment planning, and program development. Once again, just to build on for people who are listening to this as a possible career choice, the path will continue to unfold. There's a phenomenon, if you're unfamiliar with this, folks, about psychology programs, is that there's an organization called the American Psychological Association. It's our sort of umbrella parent organization that sets like rules for ethics, and what they do
And they're nationwide.
They're nationwide, and they have relationships like with the Canadian Psychological Association. And there are some wonderful things about them in that they give great respect and support for people who go into all different areas of psychology, whether it's organizational psychology or purely clinical work or purely family work or purely work that is strictly working with people on the autism spectrum within this certain parameter. I mean, it's amazing. The flip side of the organization is that they hold a stranglehold on the schools that they will approve. And it's a clumsy process, and it's a big political situation here in the U.S. where there are some schools that have APA accreditation that utterly by no means should have APA accreditation, because the education level is not good at all.
Right.
I feel, and
We call them diploma mills.
Diploma mills.
They'll take your money and give you a diploma.
And you'll, because you have that APA accreditation, simply because you went to that school, you are way closer to a paid internship and a high-level job than either you or I were. And we
Right.
went to reputable schools.
Right.
But neither one of them APA accredited. And yours, the problem with a forensic program, a purely forensic program, is that it may not ever be
Right.
APA accredited.
Right.
And yet, and the reason I give you this information is because I want anybody who's considering this career to be able to make an informed decision. So even though this is your career right out of undergrad, or you're making a big change in midlife, you have to understand that where you can work and live in the U.S., working as a psychologist, depends on what kind of school you went to.
Yes.
So my MFT degree and licensure will transfer to any state, almost around the world. My psychology degree will work almost anywhere in the world, except for about probably 3/4 of the states. And the other thing that's really screwy, and I'm being very polite when I say screwy, is that the amount of licensure and testing that you and I have to go through in the state of California is at least 150% more than what other states have to go to that require APA accreditation. So I'm not completely dissing the APA. I have worked through my anger towards the organization. My life
Mostly
is
on Facebook.
mostly on Facebook, ranting. You'll see my rants. It's an example of a class system that needs to go away, while upholding very high standards for education. I think
Sure.
everybody should be held to those high standards.
Well, and actually, my school just got rid of their forensic program.
Oh, right.
So there aren't a lot of very specific degrees in forensic psychology left. I think John Jay still has a doctorate in forensic psychology, and there might be some other schools. But
that doesn't mean you can't go into it. You can get the doctorate, a PsyD or
Right.
a PhD
in clinical psychology.
Exactly.
And become a forensic psychologist. It's just a specialty. And for a while, my school had that specialty doctorate. So my doctorate says forensic psychology on it. Yours says clinical psychology on it.
Right.
So, and actually, a lot of people advised against it to me because they said it pigeonholed me too much. But when I said, I don't care, I'm not going to be a psychologist anyway, just give me my doctorate, that didn't matter to me.
Yeah.
So, and it obviously worked out with me going into this field anyway.
And I would say I'm sure that advice was well-intentioned, but I don't think it's very accurate, because you're only pigeonholed as much as you allow yourself to be pigeonholed.
Right.
I do tons of clinical work. I supervise people who do nothing but clinical work. I mentor people that are going in wildly different directions in their careers. And, it hasn't pigeonholed me at all.
Right. So as far as getting licensed in California and similar in other states, maybe we should just talk about, we talked about the educational requirement. And then after that, there are...
Oh, the length.
Sure.
Let's talk about that. So my master's took a very intense 18 months. I was working full-time and going to school full-time, which was challenging. And then the doctorate was an additional 3 years of academics, 3 quarters a year, all of them 10 weeks. So 10 weeks on, 3 weeks off for 3 quarters a year, and then had summers off, which it was so intense. I needed that summer.
Yeah.
Those summers were I would need to pull myself back together because it was exhausting.
So my program was 5 years total. You do not – I went straight into the doctoral program with just a bachelor's degree. So some people think you have to go get a master's first. You don't have to get a master's first, but my program awarded me a master's after I had defended my dissertation and finished my classes.
It's just a non-licensable master's.
Okay.
Right. I think that's the way Antioch Santa Barbara is as well.
So yeah, my program was 5 years. I got a master's and doctorate out of it.
Yeah.
When you're doing your internship, you're earning hours. So a number of hours is also what's required to get licensed.
Well, back up. You have to have traineeship hours in order to meet your trainee hours before you can even qualify for intern. So didn't you do a train? Did you have to do a train?
Practicums.
Practicums, that's what we call them, yeah. So I did, I think, 1,000 hours of practicum while I was in school that third year in order to look good on your CV or resume when you're applying for internships.
And practicums are like part-time internships, if you will. So that's weaved in there. And it gives you experience if you want to try different settings to do that. Where did you do yours? Or not specifically where, but what sort of populations did you work with?
The first one was an overlap because there was a doctoral program where I was doing my MFT training. So it was at Southern California Counseling Center working with families, and then we had some mandated clients that I had a chance to work with, which was a total eye-opener. And then the greatest one was, it doesn't exist anymore. It got absorbed by a large contract site called D.D. Hirsch, which is a huge mental health organization here in Southern California. Right. But when I was there, it was called Verdugo Mental Health, and it was working with chronically mentally ill adults who were able to live on their own and providing them group and doing diagnosis and treatment plans. And that was an amazing, amazing experience.
That's where they run the main suicide hotline out of Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely, yeah. And then I worked at Cedars-Sinai working on Teen Line, which is a really great organization that we taught and mentored teens to take crisis calls from other teens from around the world. So I was working with these high schoolers, kind of teaching them how to give basic counseling to people that were crisis intervention. Mm-hmm. That was amazing. And then what was the other one? And I worked at a university, Cal State, Channel Islands.
Oh, wow.
Which was, these were all real, which is another example, all these different populations you can work with.
Yeah, I went straight because just wanting to get into forensics, my first practicum was with parole and specifically working with sex offenders.
Damn, that's like right in the
It was
soup.
like jumping in the Shark Tank for sure. But for me, I was like, I want to sit in a room with them and see what they're all about, see what they have to say. Little did I know it, 2 years later, I'd totally be loving evaluation and treatment of them. But sort of coming from that cop mindset, I'm like, let me hear it. So I ran groups and did individual assessment and therapy. And then the next year, I actually followed my supervisor from there to his private practice, and he worked in neuropsychology. So it wasn't forensic.
Oh.
We worked out of a pain clinic in Pasadena, and he would essentially do the therapy with a lot of these chronic pain clients that suffered from severe depression, and I would do a lot of the neuropsych testing for them.
I did not know that about you, and I'm really jealous because my emphasis on none of the places I was at emphasized testing.
Yeah, this was all testing, and I loved testing.
Okay, and let me also say that, to anybody who's listening, even if testing is not your thing, go to a school that gives you really rock solid training and testing. It will pay off in the end.
I had the best assessment professor. She was amazing.
I did not.
Oh.
I did not.
And it's so funny because I loved testing. I said, this is my strong suit. Put me in a room with someone for 2 hours. Let me be as nosy as possible, get all this info out of them, and I don't ever have to see them again. And I kind of loved that. Therapy terrified me because I wasn't good at it because I didn't have strong supervisors in that area. So you need to be exposed to stuff to get good at it. And that's what I found out sort of later.
Well, you were by the
career.
time that you and I were doing groups together at our internship, you picked up some skills. You were good.
That even evolved to where I loved group. I'm like, group is my thing.
It's really cool.
And I thought, individual terrifies me now, So and I love individual now, So it's an evolution for sure. But you have to push yourself into those uncomfortable.
Yeah, and areas. we have quote unquote colleagues who don't push themselves and are willing to it's more of a job to them than a career, which I shouldn't have any judgment about it. I kind of do.
You? What?
I know, hard to believe.
Okay, so let's just name some types of specific jobs for forensic psychologists.
Yeah.
And again, obviously you guys know this if you listen to us, that intersection where the law or the criminal justice system comes into play with psychology.
Right. So probably, like I started with one of the most common ones, that is very lucrative if you're good at it, but you better be good at it and you have to have specific skills, is
Are you Liam Neeson from Taken?
No. Special skills. Custody evaluations. And the fascinating thing is that you're looking at a huge tableau of individuals. You might be sitting down with 6 files. You're looking at a complete psychological breakdown and testing of the mom, of the dad, of the other mom, of the other dad, of all the environmental influences. Mm-hmm. You're looking at test results on the kids. You're looking at interviews and transcripts. You may be the one that is conducting those.
Right.
And then you're putting together a presentation that's going to go in front of the court. And you better know your stuff because the attorneys on both sides are going to try and tear you down.
Yep.
And so that's one way.
The center of it is a child that you need to figure out what the best solution is.
It should always be in the best interest of that child.
One I find really interesting is psychologists who are consultants for jury selection.
Yeah.
That's such a fascinating realm. I think it's fewer and far between. I think when you start getting to these really niche specialties, but that's really kind of a cool one to, sit there, consult with the attorneys of why this person would or wouldn't be a good juror.
Exactly. And the other side of it is that there are psychologists and behavior specialists that are hired when you have a creepy ass defendant that needs to be coached into being less creepy. Perfect example, Peterson and during the staircase.
Yeah. Coach. Yeah. I think that's your next career.
Oh, yeah. Because I taught acting for a while.
Right.
So I could. I think I'm not sure my moral fiber could stand that much flexibility.
Everyone deserves a fair trial.
Yeah.
Obviously, correctional facilities, psychologists. So you worked at a county jail, you worked at a state prison. And then there's psychologists that work with offenders out in the community. So that's more of the piece that I've done, where I've worked with them before they go into prison. I've also worked with them after they get out of prison. So we've covered the spectrum of the criminal justice system with just our experience.
And I had never heard. Did you know of the program that we did in our internship was called pretrial?
Right.
Did you know of such a thing before that?
Not at all.
So this was a fascinating phenomenon out here.
Well, it's not just out here; it's nationwide because it was federal.
Right. Oh, yeah, it's federal. Okay, so the net is being cast wider and more profoundly in order to catch internet sex offenders, which may or may not be someone who has had a contact offense, but mainly is a collector of illegal pornography. So we're talking about child porn.
Right.
And what had happened here in California is some very high-profile people were caught in that net with thousands of images and thousands of images of really bad, bad stuff. And what happened when the SWAT team descends on the house to go get them is they were blowing their brains out.
Right.
And it happened about 5 times in a row, I think, with some high-profile people all up and down the coast of California.
Yeah.
So we were tasked, or our internship space was tasked with creating a program that would ease people into the fact that basically, okay, you're going through the trial, you're on a monitor. I mean, these are people that are not in jail, but their trial
They're
is
out in the
coming up,
community.
so they're out on bail.
They've never had a criminal history.
Right.
Good jobs, families, pillars of their community.
Right.
In a lot of ways. And yeah, our mission was not to do sex offender treatment because they haven't been found guilty, but to keep them alive, to get through trial and to prison, essentially.
And to prepare them for what prison was going to look like.
So it's twofold. It's this anxiety and depression management, and let's prep you for prison.
All while doing this dance of not talking about the fact. I mean, the elephant in the room for every one of those groups that I facilitated was, dude, you got caught for something. We can't talk
for
about
tens
it.
of thousands of images.
Right, and we
child
can't
sexual abuse.
We can't discuss that because it hasn't been adjudicated yet.
Right. So it was more of just this stress process group, which was weird because you do have this dark cloud over it.
Yeah.
But that was really interesting work, and that's what I ended up doing for my private practice.
So we did pretrial, and then we also at the internship site did, post-incarceration. So talk about that.
So essentially, what a big piece of forensic mental health is when someone an entity like the court is mandating someone to treatment. And there's very specific crimes that mandate treatment. Drug offenses mandate substance abuse treatment, maybe domestic violence, anger management treatment. And so in our case, it was sexual offenders that as part of their sentence, they had to agree to come out of prison after they did their time and do sex offender treatment. So that consisted of, depending on their risk level, and we'll talk about risk assessment later, a class or 2 a week that was group therapy, as well as individual therapy. Again, duration sort of depending on their risk. They could be seen weekly. They could be seen once a quarter. And then we also had polygraph testing as a part of that.
Right. And then we did plethysmograph as well a couple of times.
The penile plethysmograph.
Penile plethysmograph.
That was for assessment, really.
Which is not really even used anymore. It's been... It's been exposed so much. SVU did an episode showing how to cheat on it.
So
it's kind of ruin it for everybody, right? It must be true.
Really, it's only pretty much used for the sexually violent predators. It's a really expensive test to have done.
Yeah.
So they kind of save it for the worst of the worst.
And one of the things in your treatment of post-incarceration was that some of these guys and a few women might be on definite lifetime supervision.
Oh, the feds love to give out lifetime supervision, which means they will be on parole and theoretically treatment for the rest of their life.
Yeah. Which in some cases, you and I would make eye contact in a group and go, thank God.
No, this guy should be in prison for the rest of his
really
life.
shouldn't even be out, right? There were a couple of those that
but there are others that it was like,
come on.
Man, this is almost making this person, so emotionally unstable that they're at a higher risk level because they're so unstable because of this lifetime punishment, essentially. Yeah. But some other jobs in forensic mental health include, like I said, neuropsychology, doing evaluations for civil court or criminal court. So the one doctor I worked with, he had a few clients. There was one client, I think she had been a medical doctor of some sort, but she fell asleep on an airplane and was in an aisle seat, and they just rammed into her head with the drink cart. And she had terrible brain damage from it.
Oh, my gosh.
So, of course, there was, civil case, and she had, lost her career because of it. And so we ended up doing the evaluation to determine amount of brain damage for the courts. So that would fall under forensic.
Yeah.
Just an example. Also, death penalty evaluations.
Oh, right.
So a lot of that is neuropsych as well. So they do full neuropsychological batteries as well as personality assessments, and seeing if there's anything that could be mitigating to determine whether or not this person gets the death penalty based on it being cruel or unusual punishment.
Right. To kind of bring it back to your educational path, for those of you that are considering this out there, you can see that there's a lot of different directions for you to go. Ours ended up being specific, but we could have at any moment branched off, and we even did. Like you have moved away. You're a law enforcement psych now. You don't do the sex offender treatment anymore.
Right.
I don't do it anymore because I'm writing and producing this and working in a different capacity with a government agency.
Sure.
And as a result, my expertise in another area of risk evaluation has expanded. That's not something that I was risk evaluating. I was doing risk evaluation of offenders. Now I'm doing risk evaluation of potential offenders because of their mental illness in the community.
Right. Violence risk assessment.
Yeah, there's so many different ways that you can go. We'll come back to the violence risk assessment in a second. What I wanted to say next was, just quickly, want to let you know that the reality in today's world of expensive education is that this is a big investment. There's no other way around it. And I often say, probably incorrectly, but I'll share this because Shiloh and I talk about this, is that if I had known what I know now, I don't know if I would have had the courage to make the decision I made. I'm so glad I did.
Right.
Like it's the best decision, really top 3 best decisions of my entire life because I love what I do. And I'm at a certain age. I'm not a spring chicken and I owe a lot of money. I make a good living, but balancing that is really tough because, the for-profit model of schools in the U.S. right now is kind of crazy. Like up until about 15 years ago, you could go and get into a master's or a doctoral program and, it was affordable. And then once the government started expanding the amount of FAFSA money that you could borrow, all the school tuitions went up to the very top notch of that. I mean, it's that's a bit of a scam.
It is.
But
sure.
In the long run, if you're a psychologist and you're working in public service, technically both Shiloh and I work in public service, you are eligible for a lot of different programs. But that also means you have to scurry. So while you're settling into your day job and, trying to have a life, you might be gathering a bunch of papers and writing essays and applying for grants just to wipe off, $10,000 here, $15,000 there.
I know people who are essentially feel like they're chained to a job in a prison that they can't stand because their loans are going to be forgiven.
Right.
So what is important to you? That you have this job that you can't stand and is terrible and draining the life out of you, but it's going to pay your student loans that you racked up. I don't know.
And that being said, I would not trade my prison experience working in prison, not being in prison.
Yeah.
I wouldn't trade that for anything because it was incredibly valuable. And I have friends that have worked there for decades. And you also have to have the right mindset for working in prison. But if you're going there just to get your loans paid off, that's not a good reason to go work in forensics.
Yeah. We're just saying do your research in all facets. Like we said, licensure, guidelines, how much is this going to cost? Is it really realistic? I've written some other articles on my career and travel blog about forensic psychology because I got a lot of inquiries with that.
Oh, right.
So maybe, I'll transfer those to our website, to our blog there, or we can pen some articles too. But I have one about the real deal about pay for psychologists in California.
Yeah.
And we'll put those up. So
yeah, I mean, there's the pay scale is wildly different across the country and also impacted. Like, so if I could maybe live someplace else that doesn't cost as much to live as Southern California, I love living here. It's a great life and this is my home now. But you move to someplace that is not expensive to live, but they will pay you less than 50% of what you make here. So it's kind of crazy. It's not, in a way, it's less respected compared to some other careers that should be transferable as far as what your cost of living is.
Yeah.
But moving on.
Let's get into a little bit more meat and potatoes about forensic psych.
So we've talked about the different areas you could work in, the kind of education and background you can have. You're basically working in courts. You get really familiar with legal language, and it might be legal language like directly related to court cases as opposed to what both Shiloh and I do, where we're talking about charges, and we hear police acronyms and shorthand all the time. So, but you are expected to have really specialized knowledge in your area. And the important thing to remember is that in a forensic position, you're going to be held accountable for that. So somebody in private practice doesn't necessarily run the risk of getting in trouble if they're off about how they're approaching a treatment plan on a client.
Right, because who's looking at it?
Right. If I'm off on a treatment plan, that's bad.
Right.
It's very bad.
The thing that is drilled into you in school and should be beyond is that every document, every note you make, just envision being cross-examined on the stand about that, because everything in forensic psychology has the potential to go to court. Okay?
Exactly. It's true. So, but that's really interesting too, because, we have colleagues that are like, I've had supervisors say, no, keep your notes vague.
Oh, yeah.
So that way, if you're on the stand, you can go, oh, I don't recall.
I have colleagues that say that because they're fearful of, that one in, I don't know, that small possibility that the document goes to court for something. And they put very vague. I've always been super detailed in my notes. I don't know if that's like the cop in me, like I got to put all the facts down because I want to remember. And I think it's important just for my next session to know what we covered. And
right.
I don't know. I've been super detailed, but I've always had that in my head. If you didn't document it, it didn't happen. And I get it, like for big things and doing assessments, and if there's suicidal ideation or something like that, you want to have your butt covered.
Well, I feel this, my perspective is the same. And the times that I have had, that I've been called on the stand, not as an expert witness, there's a difference between an expert witness and a material witness, is that I was being questioned about my notes. And I'll tell you, twice, the attorney was coming after me because my notes conflicted with another clinician's notes. And the only thing that saved me was that theirs were so vague and mine were so specific.
Right.
So
that almost, how could they conflict if
exactly, that was what I pointed out is, I was like, I don't know what you want me to say. Everything is in front of you.
Yeah. But that's a good example of how detailed it will get. These attorneys will read every single word.
Right.
And find something. So I err on writing too much, and then I can refer to my notes if I have to.
Right.
And be very specific and confident in my answers.
Yeah.
But so with forensic mental health, if you I know this is like clear as mud probably from what we've talked about, but you're really looking at evaluations and treatment. Like those are the two areas. So we're going to talk a little bit about forensic evaluations right now and differences of how does that differ from just a regular clinical evaluation.
Right.
So,
and let me take the just regular clinical and you'll do the forensic since I have more of an emphasis on that side.
Yeah, sounds good. So just a referral. How do you get a referral to do an evaluation on someone in a general clinical setting? Oops.
Yeah, so there's two things that can happen. You can be in a clinic or a group practice, like a department of mental health in your home area, or as a group practice or a single practitioner. A lot of different ways. Like for a low-income individual who's maybe on Medi-Cal or Medicare, they could be referred to the clinic and they come and you do a regular intake and you take a history. First you ask about what the symptoms, what is it that's bringing them in? And then you can do, based on their presenting symptoms, you do an entire interview. So they're self-referred.
Right.
Or
so
they
like in your private practice, a client calls up and says, hey, are you taking new clients?
Right, exactly. And they find us
simple.
through advertising. There's two big databases. One is called Psychology Today. It's a magazine, but it also has a therapist directory.
Right,
for those of you out there who are ever looking for a counselor.
That's how I found my psychologist?
Yeah, you just type the zip code in. And then there's another one called, Good Therapy that does the same thing. And they will look and see if they like your profile, if they like what you say about the kind of work you do. So they're self-referred.
Yeah, sure.
And in my private practice, I specialize a lot with anxiety disorders and life transition. And basically, I mean, as weird as it sounds, it's identity development. People who are going through sort of that major stages of adult maturity and evolution where they realize, I'm not really sure I'm doing what I want to do. I'm not really sure I am living the life I want to live. And, we call it like the
worried well.
The worried well in many
Right.
cases. Although, and that's not to say that private practice can't have, really significant issues that you deal with, like
Right.
bipolar disorder or
Right.
even mild psychosis.
But there's a niche for everything.
Right.
So forensically, the way that we get referrals is usually it's court mandated. So there's a court giving an order to someone that they have to get into therapy. So it might be tasked with the individual person to call up and find their own therapy. But more often than not, there's some sort of either a parole or probation department attached to helping them find that, or their attorney.
Right.
So like in my private practice working with the pretrial offenders, usually it's an attorney that will call me and say, hey, we hear you specialize in this. I want my client to get into therapy before their trial. Do you take someone? Post-incarceration, a lot of parole and probation departments contract with specific companies like where we did our internship. So that client doesn't get a choice. They go where parole tells them where to go. And that would be where we're
And
at.
there are consequences.
Right.
Like if
Oh,
they're
sure.
if they're mandated clients, there are consequences to their not being compliant with the
They
treatment.
go back to prison. They're
Whereas-
violating probation.
Right. And whereas in my case, it's people can terminate at any time, and they'll just either give you a call or they won't show up.
Yep.
But then there are some times that people are in therapy for years because, and I use the metaphor that, therapy, if you're really into it and you're really, working on becoming a different version of yourself, it's peeling an onion. You get one layer, you think, oh, well, this is what I came to therapy for. And then you find, oh, wow, there's a whole bunch of other stuff going on that really needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean, people need to be in therapy forever, but
No.
I think everybody could benefit from,
Sure.
a handful of sessions of
Sure.
getting some insight.
Next, who is the client? It's kind of easy in your case.
Right. In my case, the client being assessed is the person who walked through the door.
Yeah. Yeah.
For you, it's different.
For forensic, the client is actually the referring person. So it's either probation or parole, or it's the attorney.
Right.
The actual client that's sitting in the chair, if you will, actually doesn't have the confidentiality, doesn't have the rights, doesn't have the access to their mental health records, and doesn't get a say-so in a lot of it. So they're what I used to say were the secondary client. But if you do a report, if you do an evaluation or notes or any of that, the probation or parole department in this example actually has legal ownership over those. So there were times working in that area and that field where clients would say, I want a copy of my chart. Well, it doesn't belong to you.
Right.
I have to ask your probation officer if I can release some of it to you, which sounds so odd, right? You think
Yeah.
of the client just being able to have access to your own stuff. There's even times that I've done reports pre-trial to where I put on the top of the report, it's actually not recommended that this is even shown to the client or his family. It just goes to the attorney because there's so much damaging stuff in there.
And yet, even that is not going to keep the information from getting to them because their attorney is going to tell them, yeah, your report was bad.
Right. Right.
So on one side, you may never have to see that person again if it's a one-off evaluation, or like it was at our internship where we were doing updates to parole and probation on a regular basis, and then we had to sit with them in the room.
Yeah.
And deal with
Yeah.
that, which that was something
intense.
it was intense, yeah.
Because if you read a psychological evaluation about yourself, that's tough to read.
Yeah.
That's really impacting material, but because we're going to be honest, obviously, and it could be hurtful.
And that's something that on my side, a clinical referral would likely never have to
Sure.
experience.
Sure. So confidentiality, I kind of touched on a little bit, but in the clinical setting, what would confidentiality look like?
So the concept of confidentiality in a private setting or even in an agency setting, it actually is the same thing, is that you have the right to have this therapeutic relationship with a clinician, and everything that is said, with certain exceptions, is confidential. So, if you're talking about, you're so frustrated and you just like, oh God, what's a good example? And then you like, man, you're so mad you'd just like to punch a wall, or you'd like, I think about really spanking my kids really hard. I think about it.
Right.
So that's very different. It's like these are confidential things. But the exceptions in the state of California, because we have one that's specifically here, is that if in the course of me providing services to somebody, they say, or they indicate, or I extrapolate or interpret that they are a danger to themselves, and that can include suicidality or
Right.
just great bodily harm,
Right.
or they're a harm to someone else,
Right.
or they are gravely disabled, which means they are unable to care for themselves in a meaningful fashion that would preserve their life, then that I can break confidentiality for those
Get
things.
someone else involved to
Exactly. I can
help
call
with that.
911, or I can write the hold myself here at the agency. Where it extends is if somebody was to tell me in the process of therapy, yeah, I've got this little kink, every once in a while I look at some child porn. It's like in the state of California, that's an automatic,
Right.
we have to report it. A lot of us have a problem with that because you and I know that it's a lot more complex than that. And this person actually, for one thing, if they're in therapy, they're probably might be willing to get some treatment for
Right,
something
and
like
work
this.
on this, sure.
Right. But immediately reporting it is going to destroy the therapeutic relationship.
Yeah.
And that's going to go in a completely different direction. And then the other that are related to it, if a person came in and admitted that they were hurting their children, that's a mandated report. I have to report that. If a guy came in and said he got so mad at his elderly father that he slapped him around,
Right.
if his father's over 65, I'm going to report that.
Right. So child abuse and elder abuse.
And it even extends to if someone came into my office and said, I'm sorry, I'm so tired. I was up all night because my neighbor was wailing on his kids. I could tell he was just spanking them and slapping them around. I have to report that.
Yeah.
I don't have to report that you gave me that information, but and you can refuse to give me the information about your neighbor.
Sure. If you have enough identifying information.
Like if I have the address and I know you're in 305 and they're in 307,
Right.
I can report that.
Right.
So
those are,
confidentiality.
if you go and get a therapist on your own, those are the areas where confidentiality would have to be broken. That remains true in the forensic setting as well. Obviously, that's going to extend to everyone. But in the forensic setting, I always explained it to clients like this. Confidentiality doesn't really exist between us. If someone tries to walk in off the street and get your records, I'm not going to give it to them. But it's sort of a three-way confidentiality. You sign paperwork saying that as a part of being mandated to come here and agreeing to treatment, that you agree that your other party, being attorney or parole agent or whatever, there's actually a three-way confidentiality between the three of us. So that means if they tell me something in a session that raises my concern for risk, or they're talking about like, yeah, I moved and I didn't tell my parole agent, I can then let the parole agent know, hey, so-and-so's not living where he said he's living. This is something, that it seems risky to me. It might increase his risk for impulsivity, blah, 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 blah. You might want to check that out. So
even though you might discern that some things are not as important as others, it's still not protected.
Correct. So I'm not going to say everything in a session because parole agents don't want to hear everything that happens in a psychology session or psychological session, therapy session. But if there are some important things, I can divulge that. So, So those are some big basic differences between just clinical and forensic evaluations and or treatment. I mean, we kind of talk about overlapping and treatment.
Like we said, that there are people, you have your private practice, I have mine, and your work is slightly different from mine at your agency. So we slip back and forth depending on what our role is.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So we're going to switch now to cases, starting with how we got here in the first. The whole concept of forensic psychology becoming a part of the legal process has had an evolution over the last few hundred years, or last 100 years, but certainly for a much longer period, going back to even what we call legal proceedings in the Greek and Roman times. So, but the concept that got really solidified was an English treatise in 1581 that stated, if a madman or a natural fool or a lunatic in the time of his lunacy kills someone, they basically can't be held accountable.
Right.
So,
I love all that wording.
I know. And I was actually doing non-natural. I was speaking it very slowly because I think it's important. What they're saying there is that for that time, that's a pretty advanced concept of saying, no, this person is not in their right mind, therefore they are not responsible.
Right.
So that's in 1581. Now let's go fast forward about 275 years to what year was M'Naughton? M'Naughton was 1843. So in 1843, a case occurred in Great Britain. This was at the time when Great Britain and Scotland had come together for a couple hundred years under the UK. There was a lot of strife. And M'Naughton was a Scottish woodcutter. So M'Naughton became convinced in his own mental processes that the Prime Minister of England at that time was messing with his stuff. He was affecting his personal relationships. He was affecting his finances. He was affecting his work. Interestingly enough, just sidebar, that's what coming forward in today's our work is delusion. Right. You know, this guy in that year was having a delusion. He probably was schizophrenic.
Right, psychotic.
So he became so convinced that this was going on that he was going to take action against the Prime Minister. And in his attempt to assassinate the Prime Minister, he actually shot the secretary, the assistant to the Prime Minister, in the back of the head, killing him. So during his trial, 9 witnesses testified to the fact that he was insane, and probably these were people that maybe they weren't so great in jury selection, and these were probably people that knew he was completely crazy. But he was acquitted, probably the first time that the phrase was used, as not guilty by reason of insanity, which we shorten to NGI. So interestingly enough, the M'Naughton rule was basically in place for 200 years. And it's only recently that we've started to question now. Now, that being said, Queen Victoria was not having it. She said that was it was personal to her because obviously it's the Prime Minister.
Right.
And she understood the political ramifications even at that time, like, oh, someone's going to be able to say they're crazy and prove that they're crazy or act crazy and get away with crimes.
Right.
So she put stipulations on it that really set up the parameters of, okay, we're going to assume that this subject is innocent, but we're going to look at everything. We're going to look at the behavior. We're going to look at the charges. Did he know what he was doing at the time versus he knew what he was doing, but he chose to do it anyway for moral purposes,
right.
Which is actually, if anybody is out there has ever seen, probably the only Matthew McConaughey movie I really like is A Time to Kill.
Oh, yeah.
That's what that whole premise is based on,
right.
Is this person commits a crime, and then you get to understand why this grieving father went and committed
right.
the crime that he did.
Right.
So that's the M'Naughton rule.
Essentially, it's are they able to determine right from wrong, and at what degree?
Correct, except it's so complex.
Right,
yes,
right.
they can.
Because yes, in their own head they
in
can.
their own head they can.
Yeah.
But what does that actually mean?
Right.
And that was my phone dropping. Sorry, folks.
What state of mind are they in?
So now we come really far forward to 1981, and probably the biggest case that we've seen of this, or the one that's had the most impact, was John Hinckley.
Right.
So in 1981, John Hinckley Jr. was a young man who became obsessed with the actress Jodie Foster. And in his mind, he had come to the conclusion that the only way he was really going to be able to get her into his life in a meaningful fashion was to prove to her by a large act that they were meant to be together. I mean, what the meme has been boiled down to is, I did it to impress her. But it's really was much bigger than that, a much more solid and profound delusion. And so he attempted to assassinate the president.
Isn't it interesting how those two kind of parallel, assassinating a high-ranking figure?
Yeah, about as high as you can go. And then look at what happened to Gabby Giffords with her shooter, who I don't even like to use their name when it's this, but Gabby Giffords was the victim of a shooter who was clearly mentally ill. Now, if that's someone, I mean, that's another confusing version of the Manhattan Rule, because this guy was clearly had a long-term history of mental illness, but he knew what he was doing, but he felt like it was the right thing to do.
Right.
So complex, very complex.
And I think the two differentiations and concepts that people think about when they hear, so there's not guilty by reason of insanity. So that's really looking at the crime and state of mind at that time. And then there's competency to stand trial, which is the state of mind to be able to go through a trial. And those are two
completely different things. Yeah.
That forensic psychologists can have completely different expertise in.
Which, in my work that I do, I have been in the position of being on the stand and attempting to, on the behalf of a government agency and on behalf of the safety of the community, I have been a witness to attempt to have individuals conserved, which means their rights are taken away from them. They, because of their mental capacity, need to be placed in an environment where they are not a danger to themselves and they're not a danger to the community. And what's frustrating is that even people who are profoundly mentally ill, when motivated, can still hold it together for periods of time. And sometimes that period of time is 10 minutes, and sometimes it's an hour and a half. And the judge, because of a ruling here in California, which is what's called the Sanchez hearsay ruling, is the judge only wants to look at, I want to know what I'm looking at right now. This person looks fine. And we have to sit there and bolster a case of the minute this person leaves this courtroom, he's going to begin engaging in the same behaviors that he did in the past, which endangered the community.
Right. It's a lot to look at, though.
It's a lot.
Okay, so another area, we want to touch on one more specific forensic psychology means of doing an evaluation. So we picked sexually violent predator assessments. So SVPs. So this is specific to California and a handful of other states, but also federally, you can be a sexually violent predator. So as you know, you can be arrested for an offense in a state, a city, but the state prosecutes you, or federally, and then the federal government prosecutes you. So you go through whichever channel of criminal justice system. But the feds have a SVP law, and then California has an SVP law. And what it essentially means is that that person is a sexually violent predator, and then they are incarcerated indefinitely. So forensic psychologists are brought in to do these evaluations to essentially say whether or not this person's rights should be taken away for the rest of their life after they finish a sentence. So the way this is done is that people in California, people convicted of sexual offenses, before they're about to get out and finish their offense, they committed a rape, and then they're about to be paroled, what the state will do is send in two evaluators separately to evaluate them and do this process that I'm going to tell you about. So the prisoner sits down with each of these psychologists, goes through their evaluations. The psychologist makes a determination based on a certain criteria. Those both have to either be yays or nays to either let out or keep in for further evaluation. If one's a yay, one's a nay, then they bring in two more evaluators.
Great.
So, obviously there's going to be differences of opinion, especially with, some offenses that aren't so clear-cut and mental health disorders that aren't so clear-cut.
And to add to that, and you know more about this than I do, but it's important to remember that those evaluators are using instruments. They're using the
assessment
same
tools.
right.
Sure.
They're using the same assessment tools. They may be slightly interpreting them differently, or they're interpreting the outcomes differently or the same, right?
Right. Ideally, these assessments have good inter-rater reliability, and they should be getting generally the same scores on them, even though they're subjective to a point. But yeah, you can have a difference of opinion. So let's say both psychologists say, no, he does not meet the criteria for an SVP, then the person would be released and just do their parole and their treatment as normal. If both psychologists say, yes, he does meet the criteria, he doesn't then get thrown into a correctional facility for the rest of his life. That onus is actually not on the psychologist. There's actually a jury trial that happens now to determine if that's enough. So the psychologist will testify at that jury trial to talk about their evaluation and their rationale and their opinion. But it's actually a jury that ends up sending people away for the rest of their lives. So in California, sexually violent predator means a person who has been convicted of a sexually violent offense against one or more victims. So it only has to be one. Used to be multiple, but now it's just one. And who has a diagnosed mental disorder that makes the person a danger to the health and safety of others, in that it is likely that he or she will engage in sexually violent criminal behavior. So essentially, criteria 1, have they committed offense against one person? That's why all of those people get evaluated.
Right.
Because yes, obviously that's why they're in prison. 2, do they have a diagnosed mental disorder? And then does that mental disorder make them a continued danger? So the way that they do that is through interview, extensive interview, and then the assessment tools you're talking about that basically evaluate risk for future sexual offending. And then determination is made from there. They look at a couple other things like predatory behavior, what the diagnosed mental disorder is, because it should be something that relates to it, like pedophilia. If someone is diagnosed with pedophilia, we know that's a pervasive disorder that this person is going to carry with them for the rest of their life. It's not like you say, oh, they're diagnosed with ADHD. Oh, there's a mental disorder. It has to be related to sexual offending, usually. So there's been some interesting debates back and forth. But the sexually violent offense does have to be there's a handful of offenses of what it needs to be. So generally, the rapes, the crimes against children, those that involve kidnapping.
Right?
Yeah. So there's a bunch of rules and criteria and standardization of assessments that have to be used, and this is all governed through the state of California. But it's really interesting work. I before I was licensed, I was essentially a ghostwriter for a psychologist that was doing this. And so I was taking his data and putting all the reports together and just really doing the writing. But it was such wonderful experience getting to know this. And I remember when we were in internship, we had a former director of our internship who was doing these evaluations come talk to us.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And I was
him.
like, oh my God, I want to do that. Again, because it sort of fed the assessment part that I really loved, plus it paid amazing.
Yeah.
Now they're kind of weaning off this contract a little bit more, and there's not as many to do. But it's interesting. I've also treated these folks on the post-incarceration end because some do get out, and the majority of them get out through fighting the legal system rather than completing all their treatment. Because once they go into this treatment program for an indeterminate amount of time, there are, I think, 5 or 6 phases of treatment they have to go through in order to be released.
Now they
are
also
heavily monitored afterwards.
And they have to admit guilt, right?
Yes.
So isn't that would be a real dividing point between those two sections of that population would be the people who are going to fight it are fighting it on the premise that they are not guilty of what they've been charged of, right?
Usually, well,
or
not
fighting the
necessarily.
sentence.
Yeah, it's loopholes, it's sentences, it's all kinds of things.
Okay.
It's not necessarily that it's dividing them in guilt or innocence, but yeah, there's very few that get out by completing treatment. majority of them, there's some legal loophole, they get out. But they end up being monitored very heavily, lots of treatment, ankle monitors, surveillance. They will, allow a guy to live in a community and take the bus. This is after years of being out. He finally gets to take a bus. He doesn't have to have a driver with him. And they'll plant a nice, good-looking female undercover agent on that bus and see if he goes and talks to her. Because one of his restrictions might be you're not allowed to talk to women.
Yeah.
And I've seen people go back for scooting on up over to that young lady on the bus.
Which is a very controversial episode of SVU with Chris
it is.
Maloney. Okay, sorry, we have to always go back to SVU. Because then this one was before I was in the field, but I remember it because I think I saw it in rerun during our internship.
Oh, really?
Where there's a sex offender that is getting released from prison that everybody's really worried about, but there's no way to stop him from being released. So the whole question is Chris Maloney goes in. Love Chris Maloney. And he's playing another parolee in the same apartment building, and he's goading him into, should we do this? And I'm into this. I mean, they were both into like the same kind of woman.
Right.
And then the whole moral question was, well, you set him up. Did you entrap him? Yeah. And the guy ends up doing something. I mean, it turns out that it's for the benefit of the storyline, he was on the edge anyway. Probably would have offended. I mean, it was a kind of a squeegee episode where you walked away going, ooh.
Yeah. Those are all interesting concepts around all of this. But yeah, anyway, that's a big area. It's a really interesting area in forensic psychology, especially like here in California, because we do have that where we put people away forever. And some people say, I'm not doing the treatment program. I'll sit in here forever and live the rest of my life here. So.
And that's probably another episode we should talk about is sort of the prison mindset. We could talk about that with our experience as well.
Definitely.
So there are some other cases that I'm just going to run through really quick that I think are very interesting. If anyone's interested in them, we will be covering them in some way at some point during our episodes, because we're planning on being here for a long time. Forever. But if you're interested in reading, Crime Library, their Wikipedia pages are really interesting about some of the more prominent cases that did involve psychological profiles, whether or not the profiles were developed by a forensic psychologist or a profiler with the FBI or a combination of the two. So we're looking at, I'm not going to say that these cases were cracked, but understanding the behaviors and the predatory patterns of these criminals was very important. So Ted Bundy, we got Zac Efron is playing Ted Bundy, probably sexualizing him a little bit. I'm not saying that Zac Efron is doing that. I think the production is sexualizing him.
Yeah, that's a huge, huge source of debate right now.
Right.
On social media. John
Wayne Gacy, that was probably more of a fluke, but there were forensics involved in trying to figure out what was going on with all these people, the young men disappearing. Who else? Eileen Wuornos, which is another fascinating one. That was so difficult from a profiling standpoint because we didn't have.
There's no profile for female serial killers.
But they made her into one, and that's still a big debate in some of the productions now. It's like, was she really, does she meet these criteria? Because if you look at it from a gendered model, like did the media just want to generate that, like this is the first female serial killer?
Right.
No, probably not. We have a lot of others, like we have Black Widow killers that probably would fit that character, that description better.
Well, I mean, by the definition we gave last time we were here, it's such a vague definition of serial killer. For sure she fits it. But female offenders, we should do a whole episode on them as well because there's just such little data that it's even hard to determine risk and treatment planning for them.
Right.
And all of our information is about men. Yeah.
But lots of interesting stuff to talk about. I hope to hell we have not bored the hell out of you.
This is a big nerd alert.
It was a big nerd alert. Well, maybe that's we'll put nerd alert on the posting of the episode, and I'll see if I can find some public domain educational film music in it to make it funny. We'll see.
But what we'll do is I'll take some of my articles about kind of forensic psych 101 stuff. I'll put them up on the blog. Maybe we can write some more as we go along. If you have specific inquiries or questions, keep shooting them our way.
Yeah.
We love to DM you back, and we've had, such lovely interactions with listeners just by talking about this. And I love feeling their excitement for starting into this field. Because,
and from as far away as like Finland, like we've got somebody that was, tweeting at us from other countries. This is so exciting.
Right. So I love that. I love talking to people who are thinking of getting into this work, because then we just get to share our experience.
Right. So it wasn't a mini episode, but
we tried.
We tried. So thanks so much, everyone. We will be back in a couple of weeks with our next episode. Please check out the Ron Burgundy podcast today, which is what today is. Today's Thursday.
Yeah,
so by the time you get this,
so it debuted today, but he's going to take on a different topic every episode, and I cannot wait to hear the rest of it.
Yeah.
It's great. So
if you get a chance, run over to iTunes and give us a rating. It really helps us. The podcast is taking off in ways that we were not expecting, and your support is going to help us really explore some new avenues. We can't wait for a crossover this summer at the True Crime Podcast Festival with our friends over at Getting Off Podcast. We're really excited about that. We'll probably be scheduling a live broadcast at some point over that weekend.
We're going to try and make it happen one way or another.
Yeah, one way or another. And look for us on Instagram at LA Not So Pod.
Instagram is LA Not So Podcast, and Twitter is LA Not So Pod. We had to cut that one a little shorter.
Okay.
So,
but once again, if you could run over and give us a couple of stars, that would be great.
Oh, and more than a couple. We don't want two.
Yeah, we'd like all the top
Our average
five.
Is 5. Our average is actually 5 right now.
Oh, that's great.
So
okay.
I looked recently, but we love to read actual reviews. So if you guys have some thoughts about it, put it down in words on iTunes. That'd be awesome.
It really helps. And we will see you next time on LA
Not So
Confidential. Bye, folks.
Bye-bye. As we mentioned before, we are pleased to announce that we will be making an appearance at the first annual True Crime Podcast Festival in Chicago in July 2019.
The True Crime Podcast Festival is going to be all about giving you access to your favorite true crime podcasts and interacting with your favorite hosts in face-to-face and forum meetings. There will be panel discussions, live tapings, and of course, meet and greet opportunities with yours truly.
Some of your other favorites will be there, like Swindled, Wine and Crime, The Fall Line, Canadian True Crime, and The Paranormal Chicks.
For more information or to purchase tickets, go to tcfp2019.com and be sure to mention LA Not So Confidential when you fill out registration information for your tickets.
We'll see you there
at LA
Not So
Confidential.